Hello and welcome back to Lugs and Levers. My name is Joachim. Today on the bench we have this beautiful Oris automatic pointer date. It's dated around 1990 and it's before they started with the big crowns. The issues with this is that it's missing the crown. By the ad it said it's not running, and as you can see it's a bit scratched up and the loom is missing. But to my surprise the balance actually starts moving when we move the watch around a bit, so the automatic work seems to be working. And as you can see the stem just fell out. Now let's get into the case and see what we find inside. Having a look at the case back, the sapphire crystal is really scratched up. The automatic rotor is winding fine, and as you can see the balance it's spinning. So let's start by removing the automatic works so we can more easily check on the rest of the watch. The automatic works is held in place by these two screws. And let's remove the movement holder screws. Those are what's keeping the movements inside of the case. Then we can remove the case ring. As you can see the movement is quite a bit smaller than the actual dial. Dial is in fine condition. As you can see the hands are missing some of the loom. Let's set the hands to a good position so that we can more easily remove them. Putting a sheet of plastic in between so we keep the dial scratch free. Here you can see some issues when keeping the automatic module in place. It's the spinning of the watch. Putting away the hands in these small plastic containers to keep them safe from dust and debris. Also using boxwood tweezers here so we don't damage the hands or the dial. Next step we are removing the dial. It's held in place by these small clamps that you just snap away. And the dial we put away in this dial holder. Now that the hands and dial is off, we can put the movement in the movement holder, and then more easily we can take away the automatic module. And let's put the stem back in so we can give it a full wind, put it on a time grapher and see how it's running. And as you can see it's losing around 20 seconds a day. We have some variations, and also the beat error is above what we would like it to be. We would like that to be below 1 millisecond. Now then let's remove the power from the watch. I'm using my tweezers to hold away the click spring, and then we can release the crown slowly between our fingers. Then we can start by removing the balance wheel. Just slightly lifting it up using my screwdriver, and then we can take our tweezers and put it away. And let's flip the movement over and start to work on the dial side. Remove removing the parts for the calendar works. And as you can see, there's no date ring on this one. You are using this brass ring instead. That's driving a center wheel. That's where you attach the pointer date hand. And this is a complication made by Oris. So they are modifying an existing date movement, adding their own complication and making it to this pointer date instead. Fiddling around a bit with the wheels here, very small parts. Now we can remove the cannon pinion. Then we start to unscrew the setting lever spring, very tight screw. Then we have the final parts of the keyless works, winding pinion and sliding pinion. Now we'll start to work on the crown wheel. Then we have the click spring. I'm also removing the pallet fork bridge. And the pallet fork itself. Then we can start to remove the screws for the bridge that holds the train and wheels in place. Also here the screws are very tight. Just a slight poke with a screwdriver to lift the bridge. Then we can remove the train and wheels, starting with the escape wheel. And let's remove the ratchet wheel to clear all the other wheels of the train and wheels. The movement is in decent condition actually. And then we can remove the rest of the train wheels. And we need to remove the barrel bridge. Also this one's held in place by a couple of screws. And now that we have that bridge out of the way, we can move the barrel to get the final wheel out of the movement. Then we can have a look at the barrel and see how it looks inside with the mainspring. Let's pop it open. And using my tweezers to make sure that the spring stays in place while we open the lid. And let's remove this very, very tiny barrel arbor. Then we can unwind the mainspring. walking out here using my fingers to avoid the barrel to be part of the Swiss space program. Now that everything is taken apart, we can start cleaning the parts, starting by scrubbing and pegging on the jewels to make sure that we remove any gunked up old oil. Doing that for all the jewels on all the plates or all the bridges. And let's also take apart the automatic module, removing the cover plate, and underneath we can see the reversing wheels. Let's remove the reversing wheels. These will require some special attention when it comes to lubrication later on. And let's remove the rotor as well. Being very gentle here so we don't scratch anything. Now let's turn our attention to the case, using pegwood here to clean it up, remove old wrist cheese and other dirt. Then we can also consider what is really vintage. This watch is 35 years old basically. Doesn't really feel vintage though. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. I mean, if this watch is considered vintage, then I'm vintage myself. Now that all the parts are cleaned, we can start the assembly process, starting with the barrel. But before I go into the details, I can talk a little bit about my cleaning process. I'm using an ultrasonic cleaner with Elma Red 129 for 7 minutes first, then using a rinse in distilled water in 3 minutes. Then I have another rinse in IPA for 3 minutes, and then a final rinse in IPA for 2 minutes, and then I dry the parts. Here you can see I'm putting some grease inside the barrel wall. This is called braking grease, and this is for the mainspring to slip the right amount, since this is an automatic watch. I think it's suiting that they have gold leathering on the tube for this one, since the price is roughly the same as gold. So you put this on the side of each of these small dimples. If you have a barrel without the dimples, you should just spread it out evenly across the barrel. Now that we have greased the inside of the barrel, we can put in the mainspring. For this repair, I'm using a new mainspring here. Then we gently push it in and make sure that the bridle is on the inside. Next part to assemble is the barrel arbor, with this small little hook that should attach on the inside of the mainspring. And if you notice that the mainspring inner coil was a bit too big, you are perfectly correct, and that will cause some issues down the line. Now we are closing the barrel lid using this barrel closing tool. And adding a little bit of HB 1300 for lubrication between the barrel lid and the arbor. Removing a little bit of excess here. And let's flip it around and do the same lubrication on the other side as well. Then we can start to assemble the watch again. Putting in the wheels and the barrel. Then we place the barrel bridge. Bit finicky to find the correct position for this one. There we have it nice in place. And as you can see, this bridge is attached by 3 screws, tightening them down. You can hear that little click there. That's because I start by rotating the screw in the wrong direction first to make sure that we are in the starting position of the screw. Now we're adding a little bit of HB 1300 here to the barrel bearing or pivot points. Then we can start placing the rest of the wheels, starting with the escape wheel. Just making sure that we find the pivot hole for it in the jewel. Then we can add the other wheels in their places. Just making sure everything looks correct before we place the wheel bridge. And here we have to get all those 4 pivots inside the jewels. So just gently walking it down. Looks like we were lucky this time. First try. Then we can add the screws for the wheel bridge. And making sure that it's tight. Then double checking again that the wheels are still spinning freely. Now let's place the click spring. Place a little bit of grease for the crown wheel. And then let's place the crown wheel in place. Then we can attach the screw. And this is one of those places where editing makes a lot of sense. I think there were 15 or 20 tries trying to get that click spring in the correct position. But with the power of editing, it worked first try. Then we have the ratchet wheel, which attaches to the barrel arbor. Just add a little bit of pressure so that we can make sure that it's torqued enough. Then let's clean the pallet fork before we install it. Just very gently cleaning it with pegwood to make sure that any old residue of lubrication is eliminated. Then we put it in some essence of Renata. And then we use our dust blower to make sure that it's dried completely. Then we install the palette fork inside the movement. Putting on the palette fork bridge, making sure that we don't damage these very delicate pivots. There we go, nice. I'm putting in the screw for the palette fork bridge. Just give the watch a little bit of whine so we can check the palette fork moving. Looks like it's snapping back and forth real nice. Then it's time to lubricate the jewels of the palette fork, putting a tiny bit of oil here. Then we step this 5 times to make sure that we spread the lubrication across the escape wheel teeth. Then we add another dab of lubrication and do the same operation once again. When we have done that, it's time to take off the shock protection for the balance, to clean the end stone and the chaton. You can see reflected there's a bit of dirt and grime and dried up oil. Gently scraping it away with some pegwood and then putting it in essence of Renata. Then we have a nice clean surface. We can add a bit of 90-10 lubrication, very low viscosity oil. And then we can put the chaton on top, which is then held in place by the surface tension of the oil. And we can put it back into the movement. And then we gently press down the shock spring. And we do the same thing here with the balance before we install it. Whoops. These springs, they really like to fly. Found that the easiest way for me at least is using a bit of Rodico to stick the small spring on and then try to fit it back into place. That way you limit the risk of it flying away again. Good, we got it back in place. Then we do the same procedure with the top capstone and the top chaton. You can see a lot of old greased up oil, I should say, still stuck on this jewel. And as you can see, I already put the balance in Essence of Renata for cleaning that one as well. And giving it a puff of air for drying it. Then it's time to put the balance back into the movement. Let's see if we can manage this first try. Great, it's starting up. Looking good. And we attach the screw for the balance cock. Now it's time to lubricate all the wheels. Using different viscosity oil for different wheels. So the fast moving wheels, they are getting 9010, and the slower moving wheels, they are getting HB 1300. And we do the same thing on the dial side. And then we just have some beauty shots of this movement. Really good looking. Now we can start assembling the keyless works. Adding a bit of grease to make sure that we have these interfaces lubricated. So both on the winding pinion and the sliding pinion. Then we can put them into the main plate. Then we're setting lever. Adding a little bit of grease to this one as well before installing it. Then adding a little bit of grease on the post. Then we install the clutch lever. And next up is the spring for the clutch lever. Fiddling around a bit with it. As you can see, holding it in place with my plastic stick to make sure it doesn't fly away, and using my brass tweezers to make sure that we don't scratch anything. Finally, we have it in place. Then we have the setting level spring. This one we almost tighten fully, and then we make sure that it snaps in place before we do the final tightening of the screw. Then we add some grease to the setting level spring to make sure that the interface is good lubricated when it's metal to metal. And then for the post for the intermediate wheel, Then we can place the wheel in place. Here we have the wheel for the quick set for the date. And adding some grease on the post for the other wheels as well. Just a little bit of oil for the cannon pinion. And also a little bit of HP 1300 in between these two parts of the cannon pinion. Working it in before placing it. Next up we have the date wheel. And then we have the part that used to be the date ring. Then we add a cover plate on top. And we add the screw for the cover plate as well. Now let's have a look at the crystal. Has seen some better days. So let's start to work on it a bit using wet and dry sandpaper. We use with a little bit of water. Starting with 600 grit and working my way up the grits. Then 800, 1200, 1500 and finally 2000 grit. And also making sure that I'm crossing the lines for each of the different grits to make sure that you completely eliminate the lines or the scratches from the previous grits. And then we can start to work with the polywatch to get a nice clear finish on it. Final result, looking pretty good. Now let's have a quick clean of the dial. Just using a bit of Roddeco here to remove any specks of dust. You need to be very careful working with dials to not damage them in any way, since they are quite delicate. Also trying to stay away from any printing. Here you can see there's actually some hairline fractures in the crystal, so we need to replace that anyway. And also the hands needs a little bit of love, scraping away the old loom here. Using pegwood, using my plastic tweezer so we don't damage the hands. I'm gonna make sure that we remove all parts of old loom before we add new. And before we do that, let's have a quick polish of the hands first. This tool is basically just a felt tip. You can use that to gently polish the hands. Now we can add some new loom to the hands. You can see here that I tried to match the loom on the hands with the old loom that's still on the dial. You can see that I'm applying it from one side and just dragging it across. It's a bit on the thicker side. Should probably have been easier if it was a bit thinner actually. Then let's start to assemble the automatic works. Have these reversing wheels. Those are lubricated in this solution called Lubera, which is both a cleaner and a lubrication system. And when you pull them out, you should blow them dry and then let them sit for 15 minutes before you assemble them again. Let's make sure that we install them in the correct orientation. Sorry about the glare here. Then I actually realized I did put them in the wrong direction. So we need to correct that before we continue. They're much better. And then we can place the cover plate on top of the wheels, making sure that they spin freely. Next step is then to place the automatic bridge on top. And make sure that it sits tight. And then let's place the rotor back on. Then let's check the function that it's winding both directions. Let's let the power down from the mainspring so that we can check the terminal curve of the hairspring on the balance and make sure that it's correct in the regulating pins. Now we can move the regulating pins here along the terminal curve, and you can see that the hairspring is moving when we do this. It should stay in place. So this needs to be adjusted. So what we're doing here is that we are turning the regulating pins so that we open it up fully. And then we can turn the stud to make sure that the hairspring is fully centered between the regulating pins. Tiny adjustments. Now you can see that the hairspring does not move when we move the regulating pins. Then we can turn the regulating pins to make sure that the gap is as small as possible and that the hairspring is still centered in between. Here you can see I'm actually opening the barrel again, taking the whole thing apart, and the arbor comes straight out. So the problem here is that the inner coil is too big. So this needs to be adjusted. And with a little bit of editing, we are back where we left off. So the mainspring is adjusted and everything is cleaned again, and we can now put the final parts together. This plate here is what we will attach the pointer date hand to. We add the dial back on. Then we can secure it in place by moving these two levers. Then let's start placing the hands, starting with the pointer date hand. Just checking that it's lined properly. Then we can place the hour hand and the minute hand. And you can also see here that the hands are a slightly different loom color than before. So I wasn't happy with the matching, so I redid it to make sure that it's matching the dial a lot better. Then we add the movement ring back in. Placing the stem back in. Then we can add two screws holding the movement in place. Then let's add the automatic module back on once the movement is back in the case. Just finding the right alignment. Make sure that it winds properly. And then we can screw it in place. Then let's add a new gasket, lubricated with silicone grease. struggling a bit to get it in place. Finally. Then we can add the case back on. As you can see here, the sapphire crystal on the back is also polished up. I'm using cerium oxide on that one to clean it up. Now here we have the final result. A real good looking watch. And I will leave you with some stats and also with some final shots. And of course, if you got this far, please like and subscribe. And see you in the next one.